This is a recording, frustratingly, of Vavam Bays and the Amud Yomi of Brachot. It's frustrating because the contemporaneous recording didn't somehow go through on Zoom, i.e., I forgot to press the record button. And so I'm restating it, repeating it now to the best of my abilities. Says the Gemara, the top of the page of Vavam Bays, Amar Ravin Barav Ada Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Somebody who normally was regular would come to the shul and doesn't come one day. Hashem asks where he is. Shenemar mi b'chem yarei Hashem she'emea b'kol avdoi asher holach chashechem ve'ein negaloi. Who among you is fearing the Rebbeinu Shalom? Who is going in the darkness and light is not touching him? So the Gemara says it depends on what the reason is the person didn't come to shul. Imla dvar mitzvah halach, if he didn't come to shul because he has something to take care of, a mitzvah. So then he will in fact have light, he will in fact have success. But if the reason that he missed shul is for some optional thing that he's deciding to do, but it's not a mitzvah, it's not a requirement that he do it, so then he will not have light, he will not have success. The Yiftach b'Shem Hashem, the end of the passage says you should trust in the Rebbeinu Shalom. My time, what was the reason that was saying that this person is not going to have light, he's not going to have success if he goes to do a Dvar Shus and therefore misses davening? Says the Gemara, Mishum Dahavle Leftech B'Shem Hashem V'Loi Batach, because he should have trusted in the Rebbeinu Shalom and he did not. The halacha is actually brought down in Shulchan Aruch, not as an absolute chiyuv that one has to daven in shul, but rather as hishtadlus. If you look in Shulchan Aruch Archaim Siman Sadi Halacha Tes, the Mechaber writes, "Yishtadl adam l'spal b'beis hakneses im hatzibur." A person should do a shtadlus to be able to try to daven b'tzibur in shul. But ve'imhu eines, however, if he's an eines, he's not able to. Not specifically because of a mitzvah, but he's an einus. He can't come to shul for whatever the reason. It could be a dvar mitzvah. It could be other reasons why a person's an einus. Maybe he's sick. So then yechaven l'spal b'shosh tzibur mispal, and ideally he should daven the time that the tzibur is davening. So to people who live far away, but they don't have minyan, you should daven at the time mispal shachas v'aros v'zman shashiba mispalim. You should daven shachas and ma'ariv, the normal times that the tzibur would daven. And then that's why it's balance balance at tzibur. And if somebody's an einus and he can't daven what the time that tzibur normally would daven, when he's going to daven on his own, then he should daven in shul. The reason why I read the end of this mechaber is because it reminds us of the Gemara that we had yesterday on Bava Manaf. We're not doing Chazar now daily, but if we can find a Gemara from before, then it's a b'shtikal Chazar. So if you remember the Gemara before on Bava Manaf Aleph, the Gemara told us another member from Abba ben Yamin, that Abba ben Yamin said, "Ein tefillah shel adam nishmas el beis hakneses," that the tefillah of a person is heard only in shul. And the simple reading of that is only in shul. But we tzaychem tzu, the Rabbi Kiva Egem in Saras Hashas, in the Gilin Hashas, brings down from the Taisus and Avodah Zarah and Dalan Beis, the Taisus said that in fact, what does it mean in Tefillah Shel Adam Nishmas El Beis HaKnesses? It means that a person must daven Tefillah B'tzibur. But as you can see, I mentioned yesterday Kesef Mishnah, you see as well that we pass on the halacha, then even if a person doesn't have a minyan and he's going to still have to daven between his house or shul, he should daven better in shul. But the lashon of the mechaber here, Vishtadel, Adam Lispal Beis HaKnesses, the person should try to daven in shul. Would sound like it's not an absolute chiyuv to daven in shul. And nevertheless, the only out that you have is if you're an einus. If you have a dvar mitzvah, your other reason why you're an einus, why you can't daven in shul. So on the one hand, you have to try very hard to daven in shul, but it's not an absolute chiyuv. On the other hand, an einus, of course, our einus rachman of everything. So there's a sort of wiggle room. There's an interstitial space between an absolute chiyuv and hishtadlus to do something. Nevertheless, on the other side of it, the heter is only if someone is an einus. Continues on the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, when Hashem comes to shul and doesn't find 10, meaning the minyan starts at XYZ time, and the Rebbeinu Shalom comes and there's not a minyan. So miyadu kayas, Hashem is upset, as it were. Again, anthropomorphic language. Shenemar, Madua basi ve'inish karosi ve'inin. Why am I here? And there's nobody here to greet me. Now the Reb Kiva again in the Gilin Hashas is taken through to Chuvas Rashba and Chelik Al Siman Nun, when a Rashba says in the Shaila, the Rashba tries to reread the Gemara a little bit, but in the Shaila of the Gemara, and the Shaila to the Rashba, it's Pasha of the Gemara that we had again yesterday. If you recall, again, the Gemara we had yesterday on Bava Manal, the Gemara told us that the Shechina comes when there's one person learning and two people and three people and 10 people. And the Gemara asked, well, if they have one, why do I need to say two? If I have two, why do I have to say three? Three, why do I have to say 10, etc.? So what did the Gemara answer? What was the need to say each one of these numbers? Because each one of these numbers has something additional. The bigger the crowd of people, the more the Shekhinah is there and doing something additional. So you can get written in the Sefer as the Chroines, or it's a Chiddush that din is not just Shalom, but also learning Torah. But by 10, there was a special Vart. What was the Vart by 10? So the Gemara said in the second to widest lines on the page, in the middle there, by the two dots, right before the two dots, the Gemara said, if you already know that the Shekhinah is there when there are three people doing a judgment, so of course by 10. Why do I have to tell you by 10? So the Gemara answers, Asar Kad Shekhinah va'asya. Then by 10, the Shekhinah comes before, and by 3, Tlasa ad the by 3, the Shekhinah only comes after the 3 are seated. By 10, the Shekhinah is there before. So again, the Rashba wants to say it's not like he's sitting there waiting, like, okay, fine. But the point is that why is the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming to the Beis HaKnesses and doesn't find 10? How could it be? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom, when they're supposed to be 10, is coming before. And so therefore, if it is not coming a minion, then he's going to be, as it were, upset. I should point out that coming late to shul is a minig avasenu b'yadenu. Coming late to shul is something that has gone on by the Jewish people for a very long time. Right, the raya that I have to this is a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah on Lamed Aleph. I'm sorry, on Lamed Beis. The Gemara there discusses the difference between Hallel and Tkiyas Shofar. Why do we not do both of them by Shachar or both of them by Musaf? The Gemara says that really you should do Hallel and Tkiyas Shofar by Shachar because of the reason Makim Mitzvahs. And what would be the competing reason to say you should do both by Musaf? The competing reason would be you want to have a crowd. From here is a raya that by Shachros the crowd isn't so big. The crowd gets bigger by Musaf. So the Gemara is clear that as between those two halachic desires of Zriza Magdimin and Barav Am, we prefer Zriza Magdimin. And that's why we do halal by Shachros. So the Gemara says, but why not then do we do Tkiyas Shofar by Shachros? We do Tkiyas Shofar by Musaf. The Gemara says because there was a special shmad reason. There was Xeris Shmad that prevented them from doing Tkiyas Shofar by Shachris, and therefore that was pushed to Musaf. So as a result of it being pushed to Musaf, you have a Barav Am, but that wasn't the goal. Because as between Barav Am and Zriz Magdim, you would do Zriz Magdim, and you would do Tkiyas Shofar, even if it's a small crowd, by Shachris. And it certainly goes without saying that you can tell from various minhagim sort of how they evolved and what was the order of operations, right? Your example, you look at the meaning of doing saying Hashanis, right, on Chalamoid. So at Ashkenazim, they're very akshanim, right? They might mamish by Olenu. You already put away the lulav and esrog, you take it back out again the second time. You can imagine that when the Nusach Sfard moved the Hashanis to right after Hal, that it was like very nice. It's easy. You already have the lulav and esrog in hand. You just move on to the Hashanis. It's perfect. So you can imagine in the same way that, they used to daven Shachris at whatever hour they daven Shachris at. And then somebody's like, you know what? Everybody's coming late. Let's accommodate. Let's move it to a later time. Let's make it at 9. So if you make it at 9, so that becomes now the new time. And again, you have a late comer. So what was initially accommodating to let people all be a bravam hadismelch even by Shachris. So now it becomes again a situation where the Ben Shalom comes and miyad hu kayes. But the reality is that it's only case if there's not a minion, the Gemara says. So in theory, if you know that there's a minion without you, then you have what to rely on. But if there's not going to be a minion, then it's upon you, it's incumbent on you to be able to get there on time. Continues the Gemara. Amrav Chelbei Amrav Huna. Chelbei says the name of Rav Huna the following. So now we're going to get our word on the parsha Instead of doing it at the end, we're going to get it right here. Whoever has a mokem kavua for his tefillah, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be helping him out. And when he passed away, they say about him, what a anav, what a chassid, a student of Abraham. How do we know? Avram Avinu minola the kavah mokem. How do we know that Avram Avinu on the mokem kavua? The chsiv yashkem Avram Abiker al mokem asher amar sham. Avram Avinu got up in the morning to the place that he had davened. Ve'en amida al tefillah. We know that amida is tefillah. Shenam vayamid Pinchas vayafal. Because it says by Pinchas vayafal, it's tefillah, and he was standing. So Avos amida is referring to tefillah, and therefore we know that Avram, when the pasuk tells of Yashkem Avram Abiker, that he went back to the place where he had davened the day before. Why did he go back to the same place? Because he had a mokem kavua. So a number of things to point out. Number one, the fact that we're saying, why do I need to go to Pinchas? Just say that he went to the place that he went to yesterday, and what do you know what he was doing yesterday? He was davening for Sedaim. He davened for the 50s, if there was 50s, Hadikim, and 45, and 40, and 30, and 10, etc. He was davening for the place of Sedaim. Why do I have to go outside to look at it? Maybe the answer is because sort of Ravcha the Milsa to tell you something extra. But Pashut, you know that Avram Avinu went back to the same place where he was the day before standing, and we know the day before he was standing and davening. It's Pashut. That's what it said in the whole Aliyah in the parsha there. That's number one. Number two, the idea that Avram Avinu had a mokem kavua for his tefillah is something that becomes a halacha for us as well. That is to say, if you look in Shulchan Aruch again there in Siman Tzadi, this time in halacha Yud Tes, the Mechaber writes, Yikva mokem l'tfilasoi. A person should have a mokem kavua for his tefillah, shlo yishneu. Im lo l'tzarech, they shouldn't change his mokem kavua unless he has to. Ve'ein dai b'mashi yikva le'bes hagneses l'spa. It's not sufficient merely to have a shul to daven in. Even in the synagogue that he normally goes to, he should have a specific place where he davens. This goes back to the Gemara that we just saw about people coming late to shul. So, for example, in the Mir, when I learned it 25 odd years ago, I don't know about what it is today, but they had like a sort of a basin for seats, like to decide, seat questions. People arguing about chazaka, whose seat it is. But there was also one sacrosanct rule in the Mir, which was if you came after 9:30, you lost your seat. So you had people who, was zeicha to new seats because they would come every day at by 9:30 watching who was coming late. They saw patterns of who came late. So every day they would sit in the same seat. And so a person can't come and complain after 9:30. So either he's going to change the schedule and come early, or if he's not going to have a seat. And so over time, he loses a seat. This is how the seats go as sort of a merry-go-round, at least it was in the Mir at that time. All right, so it continues on the Gemara as follows. Amar Rav Chelbai, another Ma'ar from Rav Chelbai, Amar Rav Huna, Hayotzim Mevesak Nesses, Al Yafsi Psiya Gasa. When a person's leaving the shul, he shouldn't do a Psiya Gasa, meaning he shouldn't run out of the shul. He should go slowly. Why? As Rashi explains, what's wrong with going quickly out of shul? Because he's showing people that it's a burden for him to go to shul. That's why he has to rush out of shul, right? This is the idea where it comes out that a person's not supposed to be, that the first person who's like to run out of shul, he's waiting by boom, he's out, right? The last Amen, he's running out the door. So you're not supposed to be running out of shul because then it seems the shul is just a burden to you. With that said, as the Gemara then qualifies, Abaya says, Amar Abaya lo yamar elo meifak. Rabbi explains, but this is only in relation to leaving the shul, but to come to the shul, it's a mitzvah to run. It's a mitzvah running to go to get to know the Rebbeinu Shalom. In fact, the Mechaber again in Archaim, it's in Tzadi, this time Allah Yud Beis, the Mechaber writes, mitzvah l'rutz kisherach b'Beis HaKnesses, a mitzvah to mamish run when you go to shul. It's a mitzvah mamish to run for any mitzvah. I mentioned this morning when I was giving over this. Initially, I thought about a former boss of mine, an Asian guy, who I used to think about this Gemara because he would run mamish from meeting to meeting. He would run to the meetings. And I thought to myself, wow, it's by him, the work, the job, the meeting, it's mamish like a mitzvah. He's running. He would run mamish to it, and I was like, I had to walk fast in order to be able to keep up. So Mechaber writes a mitzvah to run to shul, and similar for any mitzvah. Afilu b'Shabbos, she'asul p'siyah gasa. Even on Shabbos, when it's awesome, no one to do p'siyah gasa, you're allowed to run to the shul. Avok shi'etz v'esek it's also larut. But to leave the shul, it's also to run out of the shul. And now the Gemara explains, how do you know this thing about Shabbos? So the Gemara explains, Rav Zera writes, Rav Zera meireish ki ave chazina lula rabbanon dekar re'ati l'pirgo b'Shabbosa. Rav Zera says that when I would see the rabbanon running to shul on Shabbos in order to hear the shir, so Amina kol mechal and rabbanon Shabbosa. He says, I thought that the rabbis were violating the Shabbos. Doesn't mean literal chal Shabbos, but on Shabbos you're supposed to do, walking slowly, calmly, and they were running. So I thought maybe they were doing something wrong. So Kevin the Shamana, Lola Rav Tanchum, Amar Rav Shimon Levi. Once I heard where Rav Tanchum says the name of Rav Shimon Levi, L'Olam Yeretz Olam V'Aralachim, I feel b'Shabbos. The person should always run to learn, even on Shabbos. Shnema Acharei Hashem Yelchu Kari Yishak. You go after Hashem like a lion is roaring. In other words, the same way like a lion would be roaring, you'd be running at the top of your speed. So too, you should be running to the shir, even on Shabbos. So I know Nami were hitting the Reb Zera says that now I also run as well. Reb Zera running, he was a short person. The Gemara tells us people would make fun of him, so Rashi explains that they would run to the Pirkei L'Shema Drasha. They would run to hear the drashas that came on Shabbos. He thought that maybe they were being Mechal Shabbos. Why? The Mamar also that you're not supposed to be taking psiagasas on Shabbos. So now that he heard that you are allowed to run for learning, then he runs even on Shabbos in order to hear the shir. I should point out one thing the Mishnah Berurah writes there in Siman Tzadi on Halacha Yud Beis. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, it's not always usher to leave shul. It depends if you're going for a dvar mitzvah or not. If you're going for a dvar mitzvah, or you're going to learn, right, or you're going to have to take care of something in order to come back to the shul, so then in those situations you're allowed to run out of shul. It's not daimel of kamasu because obviously you're coming back, or you're going to learn, or you're going to do a mitzvah. But in other situations where you're just going for a dvar shul, then you shouldn't be seen as running out of shul, that the shul is such a burden to you. Then is the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Zera, another maimer from Rabbi Zera. Igor de Pirka Riata. The schar of the shir is the running to the shir. Rashi explains why is that. Iker kibul schar brias haratzon l'shmer drashim pichacham. The iker schar for the people who are running to hit a shir is the schar hamarutza. Shari rubim einam mevinim lahamin girsa. Most people don't really understand how to put together the Gemara, understand the shir in all the depth. They're not really getting schar limud. They don't really understand what's going on. So they're not really going to get schar for the learning. What they're getting schar for is the running to the shul. It's I remember thinking to myself about this Gemara when I was a kid and seeing the Daf Yomi shir, a bunch of alcohol survivors, and everybody was old and tired and they're sleeping. So what's the schar? They come to the Daf Yomi 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. What's the schar? The schar was the riyata, not that they necessarily learned, but they came to shul. They left the house. They went early in the winter in the cold. They went to shul nevertheless to still learn. So that's the schar for going to the shir. Even if you don't understand the shir, it's the going. Amar by igud dekal duchka. The igud dekala, the schar you get for the kala, Rashi says it's the Shabbos of Ne'arego. It's the Shabbos that comes before the Yom Tovim. Everybody's coming to hear all the halachas. I don't really understand why Rashi says this over here on Vavam and Beis. We go to Vavam and Aleph, where we're talking about the Mazikim, where Rava said, "Hi duchka dahavi bekala minayo hava." The duchka that's by the kala, by the shiurim, it comes from the Mazikim. Even if it's not a lot of people there, it nevertheless still feels like you're getting pushed and jostled and shoved. That comes from the Mazikim. Rashi over there says, "Hi duchka dahavi bekala." What's the duchka bekala? Times the people are sitting there on a regular Shabbos, that they come to hear the drasha on Shabbos. And it seems to them that they are being pushed around. So that Rashi is mashma that we're talking about a regular Shabbos for a speech, and here we're mashma we're talking about the main speeches that happen right before the Yom Tovim. tell you the Hilchas Yontif. Be it as it may, the Gemara continues. Amarav Igur the Shmaitza Svar, the main schar of Shmaitza. Rashi explains. She gave a Tariach and Machashav Love and Time Mishal His mama, she's working out a sugya. So as the sfaras that you give is the thoughts that you have. Amarav Papa Igur the Beit Hamish Tikusa. The main schar of the base Ovel is the quiet. This is actually brought down halacha as well. So the Mechaber writes, this is in Yeridea, and Shin Ayin Vav Halacha Aleph, Ema Menachem Hashem Leftech Hashiftach Ha'avel. Techila, when a person comes to Menachem Avel, so if you're in Menachem Avel with the Torah scholars, then you sit there quietly and wait till the Avel starts speaking. The Avel Mesiv Barash, the Avel sits in the front, Vikem Shenaneh Avel Barash, B'inyan Shenera, Shapotas Menachem Eno Hashem Le'Shebetzle. And when the Avel sort of nods his head that he's ready for them to leave, then they have to leave. But they don't talk until the Avel talks. I like to be clear, this halacha doesn't really apply in situations where the person doesn't know the halacha. If you have an Avel doesn't know the halacha, and you come into the house and you sit there, and you're just quiet because you're waiting for him to speak, so then you're offending him. That's not going to be what you want out of Avelos. But if the person is a Torah scholar and he knows that he is the one who has to open up first, and that you're not supposed to talk until he does, then that silence, the schar, is essentially trying to convey in a mute way that you do not have the ability to fully give a recondite way of quantifying a person in a word, given a chama in a sentence. It's impossible. How could you take any soul and bring it down in a minute or two or five? It's impossible. So you sit there in silence until the Avel is willing to talk, because essentially then he's telling you that he understands your limitations, and you're there really just to share with him in this moment and the sadness that he has. And that's why the schar of going to the base Avel and sitting there silently is conveying that you understand that the loss is severe, and there's no words that are adequate enough to express it. Omar Zudra. Igra de Ta'anisa Tzidkasa, the main schar of the Tainus is the tzedakah that they would give. Rashi says, Sheners and tzedakah, they would give tzedakah towards the evening, Leparnas Saniyim Shesanu Hayem, in order to be able to give the people who fasted the day, the Aniyim, some money, so they can buy some food, have a dinner. Amar Shes, Igra de Hespeda Deluye, the schar of the Hespedim is the kvetching, is the krechting, is the crying. Rashi says, it's like causing people to cry. In the old days, they had McKernis. I'm not sure why we don't have McKernis anymore. These were professional criers. They made the people cry, women. I'm not sure if it was the issues of sort of Kol Isha or the like, but we don't have McKernis anymore. And today, the person giving the hesped, his job is to try to arouse an emotion, arouse Agnes Nevesh among the people who are there about the loss that has been suffered. Amar Rav Ashi Igra de Beilula Mili. The schar for coming to Beilula, to going to a chasana, is the Mili, is the words that you say to Mesameach Chasan. Right? Remember the Gemara in Ksubas Yud Zayin tells about Rishav Hillel, either it's Kal Kamashir, Kal Novach Hasuda, right? Mishanim Ne'ashalayim. Right, of course, it's related to this week's parsha about Dani Zakain versus Bani Zakanti. All right, all that is another vart in the parsha. So we're Zayin. Two vartlach on the parsha today. Continues the Gemara. The Gemara says as follows: Am Rav Huna. So this time we're not quoting Rav Chelba and Rav Huna. We say Rav Huna direct. Am Rav Huna. What does Rav Huna say? Whoever davens behind the shul is considered a rasha. What do you mean behind the shul? Meaning the shul is in one place, and you're standing, not davening in shul, but davening sort of behind the shul. The go around. What does it mean? What's the idea that something's wrong with davening behind the shul? So Rashi says, it's like a person is denying what the tzibur is davening to, and he's davening elsewhere. And then the Gemara continues that Abaya is then going to qualify what Rav Huna said. Rav Huna said anyone down behind the shul is a rasha. Abaya says that's only if you're not turning your face to the shul. But if you turn your face to the shul, then there's no problem if even if though you're outside the shul and davening. The more it says a very unbelievable story. Who gathered the komas the a person was davening behind the shul and didn't turn his face to the shul. Cholaf Elio Chazye. So Elio sees him in Milokatay, dresses up like an Arab. Amalek Kadu Bar Kiyam to come in March. This is how you stand before the Rebbeinu Shalom to daven outside a shul with your back toward the shul. Shalom Saf so he killed him. That was the story with Eliyahu Navi not being happy. So it's not merely a Russia. He seems to be deserving of death. Okay. The idea of not davening behind the shul that's qualified by Abai can be understood in a variety of ways. Rashi tells us that the Piskei Basic Knesset is Haiba Mizra, that their shuls had the doorways in the east, and what it would be essentially saying is somebody who's turning their back to the doors of the shul. And the Shulchan Aruch, also in Siman Sadi in Halacha Zayin, you're not supposed to daven Achar Basic Knesset if you're not turning your face to the shul. So the Mechaber explains, he says, what it means, turn the back to the shul, it means if your back is turned to the shul's doors. In other words, the shul doors are here, and you're opposite the shul doors backwards, davening with your face turned away, that's when you're saying that you're being kafir and who's they're davening to, and that's when you're a rush, and that's when you're deserving of death. But he's opposite of the direction where the tzibur is davening. There are those that say it the opposite way. It's right to be choshish for everything. In other words, davening outside of a shul in the wrong direction from where the shul is, davening, then that without your face turned towards the shul, so that is a problem in any direction that would be considered backwards. Make sure your face always turned to the shul. This is all when it's clear that you turn your back to the shul. If he's davening in the house that's near the shul, or his face is turned towards Eretz Yisrael, which we know is the ideal way to daven, as you'll see later on. And his back is toward the wall of his house, which is the wall of the shul. So then, because then he's not turning his back. In other words, if he's davening in the right direction to Eretz Yisrael, for whatever reason he's davening outside of shul, let's say it's a COVID situation or something like that. So he's davening by the shul, but he's davening with his back towards the shul, turned towards Eretz Yisrael, in a way that will be clear to everybody that he's not a kafir. So then it wouldn't be an issue. Mizman Azeh, if someone's coming to shul and he's davening outside the shul, presumably again it's somebody who's worried about long COVID or things of that sort. So he's not like a kafir. He's still coming to the shul. So obviously that would not be considered a problem. Okay, continues the Gemara. The Gemara says as follows. We had Rabbi Bar yesterday in the Maisa of the Mazikin that he got hurt when he wanted to go see the Mazikin. We asked about the Gemara Chagiga and Dalet about him being ruggle with the Satan, with the Malchamavas. Nevertheless, we have another story here from Rabbi Bar. So a rabbi asked Rabbi Bar, if I'm baby Rav Nachman, some say Rabbi asked Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok, my krum zulas of Nei Adam, the end of the pasuk there that we just talked about, Savav V'Shomis Halechim, krum zulas of Nei Adam. What does that mean? So Amalei Elad Gvam Shoim Dem Rumay Shel Olam U'Bnei Adam Mizalzan Bahen. These are things that stand Rumay Shel Olam. These are things that are very, very fundamental, very important, and nevertheless they are taken lightly by people. In this case, what we're discussing is tefillah, and people are mizalzel in it. The next line we have to remember that when we learn Rishas, it's not just important to know the substantive halachic points, but it's also important to understand the personalities and people who are all the members from. When saying Davar Shem Amroy, you have to understand these a little bit, or we can understand a tiny bit, the shtigala about them. So the more here has a line that appears many times in Shas, Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Lezer, Dami Tarvayu. Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Lezer said together. Now it's very interesting because Rabbi Lezer Ben Padas is a student of Rabbi Yechonon, and nevertheless we find something as Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Lezer, Dami Tarvayu, they say together. look at the Gemara, for example, in Yuma and Daf Tesla Beis, you see a similar idea. You look at the Gemara in Makis on Hayam Beis, I think, or Vavam Beis. The Gemara there talks about Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas saying over something. It didn't say over Shem the Bar Nafcha. Rish Lakish gave him a vicious look. He was very upset at him. And you find also Gemara's Rabbi Yochanan is upset at Rabbi Elazar. I'm not sure that Rabbi Elazar, it's Gemara in Yavamis, in the Ayans, I think, where he's saying over Torah, and Rabbi Yochanan thinks he's not quoting him appropriately. So their relationship is an interesting one. Rabbi Elazar is the Mar of Eretz Yisrael, but he's a student of Rabbi Yochanan. And nevertheless, sometimes they say things together. So, and compare this to the next line that we'll see in a minute. Another understanding of Krum Zuos of Adam is that when a person requires the help of other people in order to be able to get by, his face turns like a krum. What is a krum? Shnam krum zuos of Adam, my krum ki aser avdimi. Again, we have to know ki aser avdimi. Avdimi was between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. So when he's coming from a place, he's always brought down a shot as ki aser avdimi when he's coming. So he said, there is a bird that is living in the middle of the far seas of Krum Shemai. It's named Krum. When the sun comes out, this it has like a sort of different colors. So the point being, as what we're explaining, is that essentially when somebody's nitzarch to other people, when he needs help in order to be able to get by, his face changes a lot of colors, essentially on levels of busha, of needing to come out to others for assistance. Rav Ami, Rav Asi, Ami Tarvai, Rav Ami, Rasi said together. This one makes sense because Rav Ami and Rav Asi were students. They came together from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, learned Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, if you go to the complex where the Rambam is supposedly buried in Tveria, I'm not getting into those details now. You'll see there they also have a burial spot for Rav Ami and Rav Asi. We're not getting into that topic for the moment. It's like a person who is nistarach labrius is like being judged in two ways. So it's obviously not simple to be able to rely on to the largesse of others. It causes very much psychic damage and pain. Continues the Gemara, it's like an hamad chisufa. It's like a bread of shame to rely on the largesse of others. Continues the Gemara, another memra from Rav Huna. This time again, we're going back to Rav Chelbai, Amar Rav Huna. So Amar Rav Chelbai, Amar Rav Huna, lo elmi adam zohir b'tfilas ha-mincha. A person has to be zohir b'tfilas ha-mincha. She'er Eliyahu l'inena al b'tfilas ha-mincha. Because Eliyahu Navi was only answering tfilas ha-mincha. In other words, be zohir in tfilas ha-mincha. Obviously, tfilas ha-mincha is very important because Eliyahu Navi, our karma, was answered by tfilas ha-mincha. She'never yiba l'is ha-mincha v'yigash Eliyahu. Hanavi vayomer anini Hashem anini anini sheter esh min hashamayim. He add daven to the brimstone that the fire should come down from heaven. Anini shleim ma'asik shafmim. And it's anini that they shouldn't say that it's magic. So a couple of things to note. Number one, the Shulchan Aruch Mechaber in Orach Chaim Reish Lamed Beis does not bring down this idea of being especially nizar in Tfilas HaMincha, but it is brought down by the Torah. The Torah says that a person has to be very, very careful Tfilas HaMincha, and he brings down this Gemara that we just had. The Eliyahu Navi was only answered by Tfilas HaMincha. And the reason that you have to be especially zar by mincha is vatam nishet tfilas hashachar zmani yaduba b'ikar b'kum mitasei. Everyone knows about shachars. Shachars, the time is when you wake up and out of bed, then you go and daven. The yispal miyad kerem sheyitar batzakov. You daven right away, early in the morning, before you get stuck doing your whole job. Right? In fact, we know it's usher to be doing anything like we learned yesterday on the Gemara on the Hayam Beis. The Gemara on Hayam Beis told us that, and we bring it down lahalacha. We learned that from Abba ben Yamin. The Abba ben Yamin said that he said over two vertlach kol yomei. He was in star kol yomei al tfilas shetei lefnei mitasi. We said lefnei mitasi meant samach mitasi, and as Rashi explained, it's brought down lahalacha. Taisus had a bit of an issue with it, but Rashi's certainly wins the day. That what does it mean samach mitasi? Kol yomei is hadish lo lasis malacha. Right? You're not able to do work when you get out of bed before you read Kriya Shema and Daven. So this becomes the halacha as we brought down yesterday, 2 days ago in the Orach Chaim, right? In Siman Pei Tes, we discussed that, and we discussed maybe even learning and all of that. We're not getting into that again for the moment. So says the Torah, a person when it comes to shachas, it's easy. You get up out of bed, you can't do anything else. You go to daven. V'chein shel erev balayla zmani yadua b'vor lebeisei v'hu panim esakov. And obviously, Myra is also simple. You come home, you already finished your work. It's not an internet in those days. There's no working from home. It's not like you have to check your email. When you come back from the field, you're done. Now you can focus on the family. Avol shel mincha shehi be'emtza hayom, but the tefillas mincha was in the middle of the day. Ba'itshu tar basakov while he's still busy doing his work. Tzarich l'shum losum b'yisrael libay. Then he has to make sure to remember. He has to be very clear. What is he going to do? He's got to stop working and focus to remember to daven. To daven it. And then he gets a lot of schar. That's what the rabbis try to prevent people from doing work. Samach that is man of mincha. So a person shouldn't forget to daven. That was one point. Second point is that the when you're going to be davening, that they should have a fire coming down from heaven. And daven, they shouldn't think it's kshafim. Right? As the Rambam says in Hilchos Shariat Torah, the Rambam tells us that is the main fear that we have of Hashem bringing down miracles, is that people might think it's ma'aseh kshafim, yesh behem doifi. It's a confusion. People are not sure exactly what it is. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan Amar after b'tfilas arvis, a person also has to be zor in tfilas arvis. Never tikkun tfilas kitaris lefnei masas kafi minchas erev. Now this is very interesting because we did have a Gemara, if you recall, the Gemara back on Dalam and Beis. The Gemara said there are machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rishub and Levi, and it came out according to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said you have to be 7 gula to tefillah. And Taisus brought down that according to Rabbi Yochanan, we have also later on the Gemara Chavzayin and Beis that according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's mashma that tefillas arvis is not a rishus like Rava holds. It's a chayva. So this would go along with Rabbi Yochanan l'shitas. Rabbi Yochanan says the after tefillas arvis you have to be zor because it's not a rishus. And then we say even by shachas of nachma yitzlo gam after shachas you have to be zor. Shnem Hashem boiger tishma keli baruch erach boiger erach l'chavat tzabah. Fine. Continues the Gemara. Somebody who's nene from Sudas Chas and he doesn't give him simcha, he's over on 5 karlish. You see this 5 times it says karl by a chasen. So therefore, if somebody's not misamech l'chasen, he's over on chamisha kos. If he's misamech l'chasen, what does he get? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi zachal tershin in chamisha kos. He gets schus of 5 karlas, which means that he's going to be zecher to Torah. Where do we see that? Because the Brachot want to cover all arm and kol shafar, he calls shafar alechem for zigma, and then a bekal. So you see, it says times here 5 times kol. Now actually it doesn't. If you count it, it says only 4 times kol, but one of them is karlis, which is 2. So that's how you get to 5. And he says but it says another time there. It says that the whole nation saw the karlis. So that would sound like there's more than 5. So the Gemara says, and then it wouldn't be parallel to the story by the Chassan. The Gemara answers, those curlers were before Matan Torah, and therefore they don't count. Someone who's in Sameach Chassan is like he's been makar of a Toida. As though he built one of the churvas, the churvas, unfortunately, rooms that were in Yerushalayim. Okay, last Gemara here. Another member from Chelba, the name of Ravuna Kolam Sheish B'Yiras Shemayim. Any person who has Yiras Shemayim, his words will be heard. The person who has Yiras Shemayim, his words will be taken seriously. He will be heard. Shinam Asif Devar Kol Neshama Selikim Yarei. And the pasuk concludes, because that's ultimately the end of it all. It's the fundamental purpose. After you say everything you have to say, you have to fear God, and that is the essence of the wholeness of a person. This world is only created for this person who is, in fact, going to be a Yerei Shemayim. This person is not equal to the whole world. Rav Shimon ben Azai says, Rav Shimon ben Zoma says, this person was only, this whole world was only built to be his companions. That is how vital this person is. Last lines. Another member from Rav Chelba and Rav Huna called anybody who knows that his friend always says a shalom to him. So then Yaaktim Loi Shalom. Then he should say, make sure to say Shalom to him first. Shalom Vake Shalom Redefeo, chase after Shalom, chase after peace. Naslam Lahifzer, Nicker Gazan. Somebody gives Shalom to somebody and they don't give him back Shalom. So he's like a Gazan. Shalom Batem Artim Akem Gazelas Ha'ani B'Vatechem. It's like you're stealing from the Ani. What does it mean stealing from the Ani? As Rashi explains, that when you don't say Shalom back to a rich person, it's also stealing from him. But by an Ani, Mamash has nothing else. That literally is the only thing he has is people to take him seriously, people to respond to him, people to give him shalom, and you take away his little shred of humanity, you mamish are destroying such a person. I find very interesting this Gemara. The Gemara says, only if your person knows that this person is normal to give him shalom, then you have to be yakim l'shalom. But if he's not normal to give him shalom, you don't have to be yakim l'shalom. What about the Mishnah Novis that tells us that Shammai said, "Asay teros v'kava," and Lord Ma'at asay habe v'havim v'kava kol adam sefer panim yafais. You're supposed to greet everybody. Rabbi Yochanan greet even the Goyim in the shuk. So what are we talking about? And you greet them first. So what do we mean? That only when it's ruggle that somebody's to give you shalom, so then you say shalom to him first. And if he's not ruggle to give shalom, then you wouldn't say it. No, of course you have to say it for everyone. So leave that off as the question. Have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos.